Hey there, and welcome to Family Revenge. We're so glad you're here. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you can stay with us for every twist and turn. Let's jump right in. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. My name is Carmen, and I was sitting at the far end of the dining table, watching my father, Charles, preparing to announce something that would change everything. The formal dinner, with its polished silverware and crisp linen napkins, felt heavier than it ever had before. There was a tension in the air, thick enough to cut with a knife. It was all about to go down. My father cleared his throat, and the entire table fell silent. The clink of cutlery stopped mid-motion, and even the chatter among my siblings, Mark and Linda, quieted. Everyone, he began, his voice steady but thick with the weight of what he was about to say, I've made a decision about Arlington Manufacturing. Mark, the oldest, leaned forward, his brow furrowed, probably guessing what was coming. Linda, always a little more dramatic, shot me a glance that felt too calculating, like she knew something was up. But they didn't know, not yet. Only I did. Charles continued, looking at all of us, but his eyes lingered on the family portraits hanging on the walls. He seemed nostalgic. I've received an offer, a very good one we can't pass up. Arlington Manufacturing will be sold. The room froze. For a moment, no one spoke, no one breathed. It was as if the world outside had disappeared. What? Linda's voice was high-pitched, sharp with disbelief. Dad, are you serious? Mark, who'd always assumed he'd take over the company, clenched his fists. You can't be serious. Arlington's not just a business, it's ours. I stayed quiet. I knew what was coming. I'd known for weeks now. Dad had called me into his office late one night, and after some half-hearted conversation about taking the company in a new direction, he'd revealed his plans. The offer was too good to refuse, too good to ignore. A private equity firm had offered $40 million for Arlington, a sum he couldn't overlook. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about what he could do with it. Invest in new ventures, expand. He'd been talking about retiring for years. I knew deep down that Arlington had become a burden to him, a weight on his shoulders. But I didn't think he'd go this far, especially not without talking to us first. Mark exploded, standing up so fast his chair scraped loudly against the floor. Are you out of your mind? You're just going to sell it? Dad, Arlington is our legacy. It's supposed to be passed down. This is what we've been working for? It's supposed to be ours one day. Linda, more composed but equally shaken, shot me a look. Her eyes narrowed. I didn't react. I couldn't. What would I say? I knew it was happening. I knew it long before they did. My father had already decided, and there was nothing any of us could do to change his mind. I know how you both feel, Charles said, his voice softening, but it's my decision. It's what's best for the future. I've built this company from the ground up, and I think it's time to move on. Mark slammed his fist on the table, a mix of frustration and disbelief in his eyes. You're just going to walk away? What about us? What about me? Charles sighed deeply, his eyes tired but resolute. You both have your own lives to live. You've chosen your paths. You've built your careers. It's time for me to focus on mine. He looked down at his plate, avoiding our gazes. This isn't about you. This is about me, my decision. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. I could feel the tension growing between my siblings. Linda's face was flushed, her mouth a thin line, as if she was about to say something but was holding herself back. Mark, fists still clenched, took a seat but didn't look at anyone. He just stared at the table, lost in his thoughts. And me? I sat quietly, watching it all unfold. I had known this was coming. I had already known. I wasn't surprised by what Charles had said. In fact, I had been waiting for this moment to come. But what could I say? What could I do? They didn't know the truth. They didn't know that I was already a part of the company buying Arlington Manufacturing. How could I even explain that to them now, without them losing their minds? The silence was unbearable. I needed to speak up, but the words were stuck in my throat. Would it be a betrayal if I told them the truth now? Would it tear our already fractured family apart? And then it hit me. I wasn't just a bystander in this decision. I was a key player, a part of the change Charles was making. But how would they react when they found out? I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was coming next. The family had no idea what was about to happen. To be continued. The room was still tense. Mark and Linda were both fuming, processing the reality of the situation in their own ways. I could see their minds working, trying to piece everything together. But they didn't have the full picture, and it was time they did. I stood up slowly, my fingers wrapping tightly around the edge of the table. My heart pounded, but I forced my voice to remain steady, calm. "Dad's right," I said, my voice cutting through the heavy silence. "But there's something else you all need to know." Mark and Linda both turned to me, their expressions a mix of confusion and frustration. It was clear they had no idea what I was about to say, but I wasn't about to let them keep running the same tired narrative. "Actually, I'm the one who owns the company that's buying Arlington Manufacturing," I said quietly. The words hung in the air like a bomb, and I watched as the shock settled into their faces. Mark's jaw dropped, and Linda blinked, looking between me and Dad like she was trying to process if I was joking. I wasn't. "What?" Mark finally managed, his voice low, disbelieving. "You're buying it? But how? Why didn't you tell us?" I took a breath, trying to keep my emotions in check, because I didn't want to say anything until it was time. But the company buying Arlington Manufacturing is Summit Enterprises. I founded it. The silence that followed was almost suffocating. I could feel their stares, but I refused to look away. This was a moment I had worked toward for years, and I wasn't going to shrink back now. Linda crossed her arms tightly, her eyes narrowing. "So, let me get this straight," she said slowly. "You're buying our family's business. Our business. And you didn't think to mention that to us?" I stayed calm. "I didn't mention it because I didn't think it would matter. This decision wasn't about you or me. It was about what's best for Arlington." Mark shook his head, clearly not processing everything yet. "But I was supposed to take over Arlington. I've worked at tech startups. I've been involved in business. I've always assumed I'd run it one day. And now you've just taken it from us. From me." I felt a pang in my chest. Mark's reaction wasn't unexpected, but it still stung. The expectations were clear from the start. He thought his role in the family business was guaranteed. But the truth was, he had never been involved. He'd never put in the hours, the effort, or the passion required to make it work. "No, Mark, I haven't taken anything from you. You never showed any real interest in running Arlington. You've spent your time in tech, in startups, in your own world. You never once came to me and asked how you could be involved in the business. And you know what? That's okay. But it's not enough to just inherit something and assume you'll be handed control," I explained, keeping my voice even. Mark was quiet for a moment, the weight of my words sinking in. I could see the frustration building behind his eyes, but there was something else there too, a crack in his facade. He wasn't angry anymore. He was hurt. And I knew it wasn't just about Arlington Manufacturing. It was about the realization that his dream of inheriting the family legacy was never going to happen the way he thought. Linda leaned in, her eyes narrowing. "So, what now? What happens to the company? Are you just going to tear it down?" "We built this. Dad built this." I shook my head, standing taller now, my hands steady at my sides. "No, I'm not going to tear it down. Summit Enterprises is committed to preserving the legacy of Arlington Manufacturing. The goal is to build on it, expand, grow, and take on bigger projects. We're going to make it thrive. We'll keep the foundation intact, but I'm not here to keep things the same. I'm here to take it to the next level." Mark and Linda exchanged a look. I could tell they were still processing, trying to understand why they weren't a part of this. I couldn't blame them. They felt left out, and that was going to be hard for them to swallow. But I had to be honest. The truth was, I had been working on this for years, and it wasn't something that could just be handed over. The company will grow under Summit's direction, and that includes you two, if you want a role. But you'll have to earn it. You'll have to prove that you can be part of the business, not just be handed a seat because you're family, I said, my words firm but fair. Mark's frustration flared again, but this time he seemed to hesitate. "You really expect us to start from the bottom, after everything we've done for this family?" I nodded. "Yes, I do. It's not about what you've done for the family. It's about what you're willing to do for the business. If you want to be a part of Summit, I'll give you a chance. But I won't hand you anything." The room went silent again. I could see Charles, my father, sitting back in his chair, watching me with something close to admiration in his eyes. He had always known I was involved in the business, but this was a new side of me, the side that was willing to take control, to take charge, and to lead. After a few seconds, Mark finally spoke, his voice tight. So what? You're offering us jobs now? I shrugged. Not jobs, opportunities. You'll start at the bottom, entry level positions. You'll learn the ropes, just like I did. And if you work hard enough, you'll earn your place at the table. But this isn't about entitlement, it's about proving your worth. Linda bit her lip, clearly torn. I could see the anger and the pride battling within her. She didn't like the idea of starting from scratch. She had never worked in a business like this before, but the idea of having to prove herself was clearly a challenge she wasn't sure she was ready to face. But this was the reality now. This wasn't a charity case, and this wasn't just about family ties. This was about business, about hard work, and about showing up, not just expecting to be handed a future because of who you were related to. The family dynamic had changed, and it was time they understood that. Mark's face turned a shade of red that I hadn't seen before, the kind that made his neck bulge slightly with tension. Linda, too, was stiffening in her seat, her lips pressed so tightly together that they looked pale. I'd known this moment would be hard, but seeing their shock so clearly made my stomach twist with something close to guilt. Mark slammed his hands on the table, causing the silverware to clink. This is insane. You own the company that's buying our business? His voice was a mix of disbelief and anger, each word sharp like he was trying to cut through the revelation. You've been planning this behind our backs? You've known this whole time? I stayed calm. This wasn't the time for excuses. Yes, Mark. I've been planning this for years. This isn't something I did overnight. I paused, allowing the silence to settle before continuing, trying to make them understand. I founded Summit Enterprises to buy and grow family-owned businesses like Arlington. It's not personal. Mark shot me a look as if he was expecting me to add more to that, but I wasn't going to. The truth was simple. I'd worked hard to build my firm. I didn't owe anyone an apology for taking an opportunity when it came, especially not when I knew what needed to be done for the future of the business. You never even showed interest in running Arlington, I added, turning my gaze from Mark to Linda. She shifted in her seat, uncomfortable, but I wasn't done. Neither of you have. You both have lived in your own worlds. Mark in tech, Linda in design. You've never been involved in the operations. You've never been there day in, day out, seeing the challenges and opportunities. I leaned forward, my voice firm. I've worked with Dad on this company for years. I've earned my place in this decision. You haven't. Linda looked at me, her eyes narrowed. So we're just supposed to accept that you've taken over? That you've bought the business and now you're telling us to start from the ground up? Her voice cracked, revealing the hurt beneath the surface, though she was trying her hardest to keep it composed. I didn't back down. That's exactly right. You can have a role, but you need to earn it. This isn't about entitlement. It's about proving you're willing to do the work. You can't just inherit the business because you're family. You need to contribute, the same way I have. Mark's expression darkened, and I could see his frustration building. This is a family business, Carmen, he snapped. It was supposed to be passed down to us. You're treating it like some corporate takeover, like we're just other people. He spat the words out, his anger a stark contrast to the calm I had maintained. I was quiet for a moment, letting the tension in the room bubble up before I replied. I'm not treating it like a corporate takeover. I'm trying to preserve what Dad built and expand it into something bigger. Summit Enterprises is going to make Arlington grow. We're going to build on the legacy, make it better. I paused, my eyes flicking briefly to Charles, who was sitting silently in his chair, watching us all. But I can't do that without you, Mark. Without you, Linda. I let the weight of my words settle into the room. But you have to show me that you're willing to do the work. You can't just expect things to be handed to you because we share the same blood. If you want to be a part of this, then you need to prove it. Linda was shaking her head, her arms folded tightly across her chest. And what if we don't want to prove it? What if we don't want to start at the bottom? What if this isn't the life we signed up for? That's your choice, I said simply. But I can't just keep waiting for you to show up when you want something. This isn't a charity. This is a business. Mark let out a long, frustrated sigh, leaning back in his chair. So, that's it? We either get on board with your vision or we get left behind. His voice had softened, the anger giving way to something more resigned. Exactly, I said quietly. This is the future, Mark. And if you want to be a part of it, you need to work for it. But if you can't handle that, then maybe it's time to rethink what you want from this family. The tension hung in the air for a long time, the silence punctuated only by the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. For the first time, Charles spoke up, his voice quieter than I'd expected. "I've never really understood how much you've been involved, Carmen," he said, his gaze meeting mine for the first time in what felt like hours. "I've always thought you were just there, but maybe I've been wrong." He paused, a flicker of something like regret in his eyes. "I can see now that you've done more than any of us realized." I nodded, though the words didn't feel like a complete victory. It was a step forward, but it didn't erase the past. "I've always been here, Dad," I said softly, my voice steady, "and I'm still here. I'm doing this for all of us." Mark and Linda were quiet now, processing the reality that had just been laid out before them. They'd come in with one idea of how things would unfold, but now they had to face the truth. Arlington Manufacturing wasn't their inheritance. It was their opportunity to prove themselves, just as it was mine. "We'll see," Mark muttered under his breath. "We'll see if this is worth it." I didn't respond. The ball was in their court now. The future was wide open, and whether they walked into it with me or not was up to them. The tension from the previous conversation hung in the air, thick and heavy. Mark was still seething, Linda quietly fuming, while Charles remained the quiet observer, his usual calm demeanor no longer offering much reassurance. They had heard the truth, but that didn't mean they understood it. I knew I needed to cut through the anger, to show them that this wasn't just about me taking control. This was about all of us finding a way to move forward. And that's why I was offering them something they didn't expect, something that would require them to leave behind their assumptions and step into the unknown. I let the silence stretch for a moment, giving Mark and Linda the space to process what had just been revealed before speaking again. "I know you're both upset, and I get it. This wasn't what you expected, but I'm giving you a chance. I'm not cutting you out of Arlington's future. Far from it." Mark shot me a skeptical glance. "A chance? To do what? Work in your company now?" His tone was dismissive, the sting of being blindsided still fresh. He shifted in his seat, clearly wrestling with the idea of starting from scratch, especially after all the years of assuming he would just inherit everything. "Yes, to work in Summit Enterprises," I said, trying to keep my voice steady but firm. "I'm offering you both a role in the future, but it won't be easy. You'll start at the bottom, just like anyone else would. You'll learn the business from the ground up." Linda looked at me, her arms crossed, brows furrowed. "From the bottom? You want us to, what? Start entry level? After everything we've done for this company, you're telling us we have to earn it?" I nodded, my eyes meeting hers. "Yes, Linda. You've never been involved in the day-to-day operations. You've built your own careers, Mark in tech, and you with your design business. But you've never put in the time here. You haven't learned what it takes to make a business like Arlington work, but I'm giving you the chance to. No one is above the work, not even me." Mark scoffed, but there was something behind his eyes now, something more reflective. "And what makes you think we want to work in construction? I've spent years in tech, building startups. You think I'm just going to throw all that away and start in some construction company?" I sighed, trying to suppress my frustration. "No, Mark. I don't expect you to throw anything away. But Summit Enterprises isn't just about construction. It's about expanding. We're going to be entering new markets, including a $150 million project in Texas. We'll be looking into larger commercial developments, and I need people who can see the bigger picture. You'll start at entry level, yes, but there's room to grow. And there's more to this than just building buildings. We're building a company, a new kind of legacy." Linda hesitated, clearly torn. "And you expect us to just leave our lives behind?" "My design career is going well. I have clients. I have a name in that world." I saw the uncertainty in her eyes, the doubt creeping in. She had always been proud of her independence, her career. The idea of starting over wasn't one she was ready to embrace, but I wasn't offering her a choice. I was offering her an opportunity. "You don't have to leave it behind, Linda. We can work out a hybrid role, something that incorporates your design expertise into our commercial projects. You've always had a great eye for aesthetics. Let's use that to make Summit's development something special. But you'll still need to learn the ins and outs of business management, project oversight, and how to make the whole thing work." She looked at me, processing the idea. I knew it wasn't an easy sell, but it was her chance to redefine her role in a much larger world, one where her talents could make a real difference. Mark, though, wasn't as convinced. He crossed his arms, still looking doubtful. "So, let me get this straight. You're offering us positions, but we have to start from the bottom. You want me to drop everything I've built in tech and work in construction for a chance to move up? How long is this going to take? I leaned forward, keeping my voice steady. The timeline is up to you, Mark. How long it takes for you to move up depends on how much work you're willing to put in. There's no quick path to the top, but if you're committed, if you show up every day ready to learn and work hard, I promise there's a future here for you. You won't be in the trenches forever. I could see him warring with himself, the dream of taking over Arlington slipping away, but the lure of the future, of being part of something bigger, of making a real impact, pulling at him. Charles, who had been silent throughout the conversation, finally spoke up, his voice low but measured. Carmen's right. You've got a chance here, maybe not the one you thought you'd have, but it's a chance. I can't give you anything more than that. The business world's changed, and so has the way we're going to move forward. I looked at my father, surprised to hear him back me up, but I knew he understood. He knew the value of hard work, even if it hadn't always been acknowledged. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, I said, looking back at Mark and Linda. You can walk away now, or you can choose to be part of something that can grow, something bigger than any of us. But if you choose to stay, you have to commit. No more entitlement. No more waiting for someone to hand you the keys. Mark shifted in his seat, clearly struggling with the weight of the decision. And if we don't want to? If we don't want to start over? I shrugged. Then Summit will move on without you. I'm not here to beg, but the door is open if you're willing to walk through it. The room went quiet again. My offer was clear. It was now up to Mark and Linda to decide if they were ready to take that step, or if they'd remain on the sidelines, watching as Summit Enterprises moved forward without them. The early days at Summit Enterprises were rough for Mark and Linda. There was no denying that. When I told them that they would have to start from the bottom, I don't think either of them had expected it to hit them as hard as it did. Mark's pride was something I knew well. He'd always been the kind of person who believed that just because he had experience in other areas, it should translate into success here. But construction management wasn't like tech startups. It wasn't about coding or numbers. It was about the physical work, the logistics, the long hours, and the sweat. He was assigned to a project as a coordinator, a position that was necessary but not glamorous. I saw him struggle with the basics, moving between contractors, organizing materials, even keeping track of timelines. The work was messy, and it didn't fit with his expectations. He wanted to jump in as a leader, but I wasn't going to hand him that position without him proving he could earn it. At first, he was frustrated, calling me on the side, trying to bargain his way up. Carmen, this isn't how I work. I've run startups. I've been in the fast lane, he'd say, as if his experience in tech could somehow justify his impatience. I'd listen, but I never relented. Mark, this is a different world now. You're building from the ground up, and you need to learn the ropes. I don't care about your past. I care about what you're willing to do right now. It wasn't until several months later, after he'd worked his way through the small frustrations of construction project management, solving problems with the team, keeping clients happy, handling tight deadlines, that I noticed a change in him. The light of frustration that had constantly been in his eyes started to shift. He began to take pride in the progress of his projects, finding satisfaction in solving issues on site, and he started making decisions without constantly needing my input. I knew it had clicked for him the day he called me, almost laughing on the phone. You were right, he admitted. I hated it at first. I thought I could just come in and lead, but now I see why it matters to understand every part of this business. It's not just about calling the shots. It's about making sure everyone gets their piece right. That was when I knew he was on his way to earning the respect he needed. Linda, on the other hand, had always been more reserved. She'd been doing well in her freelance design work and wasn't sure she wanted to leave that world behind. I understood her hesitation, but I also knew that she had talent in a space where Summit Enterprises could grow. We needed someone with a fresh perspective on design, especially when it came to commercial projects. I proposed a hybrid role for her, one where she could leverage her creative skills while also learning the ins and outs of project management. At first, she balked. I didn't spend years in design school to become a project coordinator, she'd said, her voice sharp with resistance. I already have clients who value my work. Why should I change all that? But as much as I understood her reluctance, I knew the bigger picture. Linda, your design expertise is important, but so is your understanding of how construction works. If you want to make an impact here, you need to understand what's behind the creativity. The collaboration between design and construction is what makes these projects successful. You don't have to leave your design career behind. You just need to expand it. Her transition was slow, but she began taking on small projects within Summit, overseeing renovations that allowed her to incorporate her design into the construction process. The work wasn't as glamorous as she had envisioned, but I saw the pride she took in making each project her own. Soon, she was leading commercial renovation efforts for major clients, designing functional yet aesthetically pleasing spaces. I watched as both Mark and Linda slowly, but steadily, gained a sense of purpose in their new roles. They weren't just taking orders anymore, they were becoming integral to the company's success. As they grew more confident, I saw something change within them both. They began to see the value in what they were doing, not just as a means of survival, but as a means of growth. Charles, who had been an observer for most of this, started to see it too. As my vision for Summit Enterprises began to take shape, he started to give me more credit for the decisions I was making. For the first time, he was acknowledging how much I had been involved and how much I had been pushing not just for the company's success, but for the success of the family as a whole. I'd catch him looking at me with a little more respect than he had before. There were moments when he'd turn to me for advice, consulting on client meetings, asking for insight into operations, and I could tell that, for him, this wasn't just about handing over the reins. It was about embracing what I had created and seeing that it worked. But as much as I appreciated that, I also knew it wasn't just about me anymore. The company was growing, yes, but it was because everyone had started to pull their weight. My vision for Summit wasn't just mine, it was becoming ours. As the months passed, new projects came in, some bigger than we'd ever anticipated. Mark and Linda found their footing. The company grew. And while there was still work to be done, I felt a sense of pride in the transformation we had all gone through. Summit Enterprises wasn't just about what I had built, it was about what we were building together. The hum of the construction site was familiar, the noise of hammers striking nails, and the distant buzz of machinery setting a rhythm that I had come to love. I stood at the edge of the project, my hard hat in place and my eyes scanning the plans spread across the table before me. Summit Enterprises was in the middle of a multi-million-dollar development, one that would mark the expansion of our company into new markets. This was the next step, the one I had worked for, the one I had known would get us to where we needed to be. Mark was walking the site with me, pointing out changes in the layout, talking to the contractors, his confidence much more solid now than it had been a few months ago. He was no longer the frustrated outsider. He had found his place within the company, a position he could take pride in. His journey hadn't been easy, but I could see it had been worth it. Linda, too, had begun to find her stride. She had joined Summit's design team, now leading a major branding project for a new commercial building that would showcase Summit's architectural vision. She blended her creativity with the company's broader goals. No longer just a freelance designer, but a key player in a much larger vision. I watched them, the two of them, growing not just as professionals, but as real members of this business. They were becoming more than just my siblings, they were becoming partners. I smiled to myself, taking in the sight of Mark conversing with our team and Linda discussing color palettes with the architects. They weren't just helping build physical structures anymore, they were helping shape Summit's future. Charles, too, was seeing the growth. He had become more involved in the company again, but in a different way. No longer the leader of Arlington, he now served as a consultant, offering advice and keeping his hand in client relations. Though he was technically retired, I could see him enjoying the shift in dynamic, the ability to mentor without the stress of daily operations weighing him down. It was as if he had finally found peace with the decisions we had made, and with the direction I was taking Summit. That night, we were all set to attend a major gala, one where Summit Enterprises was being recognized for its expansion and success in the construction industry. It was a night of recognition, not just for the company, but for me, for the vision I had held so tightly to. My leadership had been tested time and time again, but now it was clear I had done it. Summit Enterprises wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. As I walked into the event, I felt the familiar pulse of anticipation in my chest. It wasn't just about the accolades or the awards, it was about the recognition of the hard work, the countless hours spent working side by side with Mark, Linda, and the rest of our team. It was about proving that the legacy of Arlington Manufacturing had evolved, that it wasn't just about keeping things the same, it was about pushing forward, building on what my father had started and taking it to new heights. The award ceremony was a blur of applause and speeches. Summit had earned the recognition it deserved. But the most important moment for me came later, when I stood in front of my family and had a moment of clarity. I looked at Charles, who was standing next to me with a proud smile. For the first time in a long while, he saw me, not just as his daughter, but as a leader, someone who had turned his dream into something bigger, something lasting. I could see the respect in his eyes, something I had never seen before. I had spent so much of my life trying to live up to his expectations, trying to prove that I could do it. But tonight, as I stood there with him, I realized something. It wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was about what we had built together. After the awards, the evening wound down into laughter and conversation, and as I stood in front of the crowd, I realized how far we had come. The room was filled with people I'd worked with, people I'd trusted, people who had made this all possible. But more importantly, it was filled with family. Mark and Linda by my side, Charles in the background, content and proud. As the night drew to a close, I found myself standing by the window, looking out at the city lights, reflecting on everything we had accomplished. I thought back to that Thanksgiving dinner, the one where everything seemed to fall apart. It had been the catalyst for all of this, the moment when everything changed. And now, here we were. Summit Enterprises was a success. Arlington Manufacturing's legacy lived on, but it had evolved. It had grown. It was no longer just a family business. It was a thriving, ambitious company that was ready to take on the world. As I looked around, I realized that my family wasn't just my blood anymore. They were my business partners. We weren't divided by old expectations or old grudges. We were united by a shared vision of what we could accomplish together. The future was ours to build, and I had never been more certain of that. The elegant venue buzzed with energy as the first annual Employee Appreciation Dinner for Summit Enterprises kicked off. The event was a celebration not just for the company, but for the hard work, growth, and transformation we had all gone through in the past few years. I had never imagined standing here in this moment, looking out at the people who had helped make Summit the powerhouse it was today. Charles, Mark, and Linda were all there, as was the rest of our team. Each of them had contributed to the company's growth in their own way. Charles, once the proud patriarch of Arlington Manufacturing, had now found a new role as a consultant and mentor. He was still actively involved in advising us, but there was a lighter air about him these days. He had found peace in knowing Summit's future was secure and that the company would continue to honor the legacy of Arlington. Mark and Linda, too, had transformed in front of my eyes. They had started from the bottom, unsure and frustrated, but now they stood as real contributors to Summit. Mark had taken on a senior project management role, overseeing multiple projects, and Linda had become a driving force in our design department, bringing her creativity to major commercial developments. They had both earned their places, and it wasn't just because we were family. It was because they had worked hard to prove their worth. The speeches began with Charles, who stood at the podium with a proud smile. He spoke about the evolution of the business and how proud he was to see Summit Enterprises thriving. I watched him, knowing how hard it had been for him to let go of Arlington. He had built it from the ground up, and seeing him finally acknowledge the work I had done to build Summit had meant more than words could express. When it was Mark's turn, he gave a speech that surprised me. Gone was the anger and frustration from those early days. Now he spoke with humility, recognizing how much he had learned and grown, how he was now fully invested in Summit's future. It was a far cry from the Mark I had seen when I first introduced him to the world of construction. Linda, always the more reserved of the two, spoke next. Her words were thoughtful, acknowledging the shift in her role and how much she had come to appreciate the work we were doing. She spoke about how Summit wasn't just about construction. It was about design, vision, and creating spaces that would last for generations. Her design expertise had elevated our projects in ways I hadn't expected, and I was proud of her for embracing the challenge. Finally, it was my turn to speak. I took the podium and looked out at the sea of faces before me, employees, family, colleagues, and friends. This company, this journey, had been a long one, but it hadn't been easy. There had been so many obstacles, so much doubt. Doubt in the business, doubt in myself, doubt from my family. But now, as I stood there, I realized that Summit had transformed into something greater than any of us had ever imagined. I'm proud of what we've built, I began, my voice steady. Not just the buildings or the projects we've completed, but the way we've grown together. We're no longer just a family business. We are a family of business partners. And that partnership, that unity, is what has made Summit successful. I paused for a moment, letting my words sink in. I saw my parents exchange a glance, and Mark and Linda were nodding, their eyes meeting mine. There was no more tension, no more resentment between us. We had come through the fire together, and now we were stronger for it. The legacy of Arlington Manufacturing lives on in the work we do. But it's not just about honoring the past, it's about creating a future that none of us could have imagined when we started. We are here, together as partners, and together we'll continue to grow. The room erupted into applause. It wasn't just for me, it was for all of us. For Mark, Linda, Charles, and the rest of the team. We were no longer divided by old wounds or expectations. The family dynamic had shifted, and it felt right. For the first time, I looked at my family not just as relatives, but as true partners in Summit's success. Later that evening, as we all gathered for a toast, I found myself reflecting on the journey we had taken. It all started with that dinner, when everything seemed to fall apart, when I had revealed the truth about the sale of Arlington Manufacturing. Back then, I never could have imagined how we would all evolve, how we would come together to build something bigger than any of us could have done alone. As I raised my glass, I caught Mark's eye, and Linda's too. There was no longer any divide between us. We had all earned our place at the table, not because we were family, but because we had worked for it. The evening ended with laughter, camaraderie, and the feeling that the future was wide open for all of us. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but I knew we would face it together, not as a family divided, but as partners building a legacy that was bigger than any of us had ever imagined. Years had passed since the first annual Employee Appreciation Dinner, and Summit Enterprises had transformed in ways I had only dared to dream about. As I stood in my office, overlooking the city skyline, I marveled at how far we'd come. Summit wasn't just a business anymore. It was a leader in the construction industry, with over $500 million in assets and a diverse portfolio that spanned multiple sectors. We had grown into something that could stand on its own, strong, resilient, and poised for the future. I'd spent the morning reviewing a new project proposal, a multi-million-dollar development in Dallas, and as I made the final edits, I couldn't help but reflect on how this moment had felt so out of reach when we were first starting out. Back then, it felt like I was holding onto a dream that might slip through my fingers, but now it was a reality. Summit was thriving, and my family had played a critical role in that success. Mark had worked his way up to a senior role in project management, overseeing large-scale developments. He had gone from a frustrated, reluctant employee to one of the key leaders within the company. I knew he had struggled with the transition, but now, as I watched him run a meeting with clients, I saw the respect he had earned, not just from the team, but from the industry. Linda, too, had found her place within Summit. She had expanded her role into high-level design strategy, focusing on major commercial developments. Her creative touch had elevated our projects, transforming them into spaces that not only functioned well, but also left a lasting impact on the communities they were built in. She had fully embraced the challenges, even when she had doubts in the beginning. Watching her now, as a key player in Summit's growth, made me proud of how far she had come. Charles, my father, had finally embraced his retirement. He had stepped back from the day-to-day operations but remained involved in a consultant role, offering his expertise when needed. He and my mother had taken to traveling the world, enjoying the freedom that came with their new chapter. Though he was no longer at the helm of the company, I knew his legacy was still woven into Summit's fabric. For the first time, I truly understood how much I had learned from him. His tough love, his vision, his belief in hard work. It wasn't always easy, but I realized now that it had shaped me into the leader I was today. I'd taken his lessons and built on them, pushing Summit to new heights. As I leaned back in my chair, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. Summit wasn't just a company anymore. It was a reflection of everything I had fought for, my vision, my family's legacy, and the work we had all done together. I thought about how far we had come from the days of family dinners where the tension had been thick, when my siblings and I had been divided by expectations and misunderstandings. Now we were united in a way we never had been before. We were no longer just a family trying to hold on to something from the past. We were partners in building something new, something bigger than ourselves. I walked to the window, looking out at the city below. It was a beautiful, clear day, and the view stretched as far as the eye could see. I thought about how we had all changed, how I had changed. From a daughter who once struggled with her father's expectations to a leader who had forged her own path, carving out a future for Summit and for the family. The sound of my phone buzzing on my desk interrupted my thoughts. I picked it up and saw a message from Mark. "Can we meet for lunch? I've got something I want to discuss with you." I smiled to myself. We were no longer just siblings. We were business partners. and the road ahead of us was full of potential. I quickly responded, "Sure, I'll see you at noon." As I stood there, a deep sense of fulfillment washed over me. Summit Enterprises was strong, and my family, my true partners, had earned their place in this world. We had done it together. The journey wasn't over, and the challenges ahead were still unknown, but I felt ready. We were building something that would last for generations, and this was just the beginning.